This presentation is about special education law and how it helped define our special education system. In 1868, the 14th Amendment was ratified, and it defined national citizenship and forbids the states to restrict the basic rights of citizens or other persons. Within it, there is the Equal Protection Clause as well as the Due Process Clause. Galatians 3:28 reminds us that we are one in Christ Jesus, and obeying these laws promotes an equitable education for all students because it provides procedural safeguards and a least restrictive environment to support each student's educational potential. On May 17, 1954, the U.S. Supreme Court decided in the Brown v. Board of Education of Topeka case that it was unconstitutional for educational institutions to segregate children by race. This landmark legal ruling would have far-reaching implications for the special education arena. Starting with Brown v. Board of Education, the federal courts assumed a significant role in resolving educational controversies, and during the 60s and 70s, federal courts expanded constitutional protections afforded to the individuals in school settings. On April 9, 1965, the Elementary and Secondary Education Act was signed as part of the War on Poverty. It called for equal access to education for all students, and with the passage of this act, federal aid to education doubled. Nearing the end of 1971, landmark court decisions advanced educational opportunities for students with disabilities. The Pennsylvania Association for Retarded Citizens versus the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania and the Mills versus Board of Education of the District of Columbia established the responsibility of states and localities to educate children with disabilities. Thus, the right of every child with a disability to be educated is grounded in the Equal Protection Clause of the 14th Amendment of the United States Constitution. In 1973, Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act was passed. Within this section, otherwise qualified individuals shall not be excluded from participating in or subjected to discrimination due to their respective disabilities. It also assured that entities had compliance, remediated violations, corrected historical limiting circumstances, and adopted grievance procedures to allow these students to engage in education the way other students were allowed to. In 1975, President Ford signed the Education for All Handicapped Children Act, known as Public Law 94-142. This was a response to a congressional concern for more than 1 million children with disabilities excluded entirely from the education system and the children with disabilities who had only limited access. This law provided 4 purposes: to assure that all children with disabilities have available to them a free, appropriate education, which emphasizes special education and related services designed to meet their needs, assures the rights of children with disabilities and their parents are protected, assists states and localities to provide for education for all students with disabilities, and to assess and assure the effectiveness of efforts to educate all children with disabilities. In 1986, President Reagan signed the Handicapped Children's Protection Act, which gave parents of children with disabilities more say in the development of their child's individual education plan. In 1990, Public Law 101-476 significantly changed Public Law 94-142 by adding traumatic brain injury and autism as disability categories. It also stipulated that IEPs must include individual transition plans to help students transition to post-secondary life. In 1990, President Bush signed the Americans with Disabilities Act. Within this act, Titles 2 and 3 applies to schools, and it prohibits discrimination against those who are disabled. It required compliance of schools who do not receive federal aid as well. In 1997, the Education for All Handicapped Children's Act, Public Law 94-142, became the Individuals with Disabilities Act, which was authorized by President Clinton. It emphasized the same curriculum for all students and expanded the developmental delay definition from birth to 5 to include the ages between 6 and 9. In January of 2002, President Bush reauthorized the Elementary and Secondary Education Act with the No Child Left Behind Act. With No Child Left Behind and the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, there's provisions and requirements combined to provide both individualized instruction and school accountability for students with disabilities. Under No Child Left Behind, the progress and performance of students with disabilities is a shared responsibility of general and special education teachers, providing enhanced accountability for students with disabilities. In 2004, there were amendments made to the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, which allowed states and localities to employ a response to intervention framework. The response to intervention framework is a school-wide multi-level system for preventing school failure for students. Universal screening is used to identify students at risk for poor learning outcomes, and progress monitoring is used to determine when a student has or has not responded to instruction. It also uses database decision-making for instruction, and movement within the system is utilized in accordance with state law to ensure that all students have equal access to rigorous education. In 2015, President Obama reauthorized the Elementary and Secondary Education Act and replaced and updated the No Child Left Behind Act. This provides all children with significant opportunity to receive a fair, equitable, and high-quality education and close achievement gaps. This reminds us of Matthew 25:40, which says, "Whatever you did for the least of these, you did for me." And under this act, we are making sure that all students have equal opportunity for high-quality education and that the achievement gap is closed, including our special education students. This recognizes the multidisciplinary individualized education program team to make critical decisions for these students' needs and gives them control over the students' decisions, to include the parents who are involved. It also recognizes the specialized instructional support personnel for implementing intervention programs and the specific support for the students who need it. Thank you for attending to my presentation on special education law. Here's the list of references that I used in researching each of these topics.